All right, welcome to our New Testament Bible read-along, week 13. Week 13, you know what that means, that we've finished a quarter of the year. Divide 52 weeks by 4 and you get 13. So we're a quarter of the way there. If this was a mile run, we're one way around the track. Okay. Now, we're continuing this week in the Gospel of Luke, and as we do, we're going to get further into Luke's narrative of Jesus' ministry. So, because some of the material that we've already read from Matthew and from Mark, I want to focus in particular on some things that are distinct about Luke in the section that we'll be reading this week. First of all, there's a section here that we often refer to as the Sermon on the Plain. It corresponds to the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew, but we call it the Sermon on the Plain because Luke describes Jesus coming down from part of the mountain to a flat place, a plateau, where he can meet with people more easily. Different way of describing, I think, the same place. And it's a shorter version, but it emphasizes different things because it's shorter. In this sermon, we have a statement of blessings, but interestingly, we also have a statement of curses, the negative, what happens when you aren't this kind of person, because the reign of God means not just blessing for God's people, but it's going to mean judgment and exclusion for those who do not receive God's gift. Luke is going to make it easier for us to see in his statements of blessing and curses too, that a lot of this blessing has to do with giving up our reliance on money, on status, on power, on worldly circumstances, if you will, and relying on God's provision. And that's very much what this is going to be about. But Luke is also going to highlight other themes that we've seen from Matthew. How we deal with others, how we love others, how we don't judge others, and the consistency of our discipleship, how we're called to follow Jesus entirely. Now, a fun thing about the Gospel of Luke is that he often shows us Jesus eating with people. There are many meal scenes, and this will continue in the second volume of Luke, the book of Acts, which carries the story into the early church, and we see the early church eating together on many occasions. Now, in this section, we're going to see Jesus in a Pharisee's house. We normally think of a Pharisee as an adversary, and this guy is a kind of an adversary, or at least a skeptic. That story is going to highlight Jesus' forgiveness of sinners, an authority that he exercises apart from the temple. He's really claiming the temple's function for himself. And Jesus is going to say, those who scorn these sinners who are being forgiven, well, you're really fighting against God. You are ignoring what God is doing. Not a good thing to do. Notice the way that Luke emphasizes women in this section. There'll be a brief note about the women who are following Jesus along with the 12. And in fact, some of these women are people of means, and they're actually supporting Jesus and the 12 while they are traveling and preaching and teaching. So, just as a reminder, one of the things Luke is doing is getting us ready for Volume 2, for the story of the continuation of Jesus' ministry in the early church, as narrated in the book of Acts. So we're kind of getting up for that, but we've got a lot of Luke still to read. So enjoy this week's reading that takes us further up and further in the story of Jesus.